This portion of the news brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
Catching a jitney is a convenience that most Bahamians have easy access to.
However, as Jared Higgs tells us tonight, for a particular group of Bahamians, mainly the disabled and some elderly, this feat can prove to be quite a challenge.
Samuel Strawn is blind, and like many other members of the disabled community, he is fed up with some bus drivers.
Most of the bus, they normally, some will stop and some will, they doesn't pass by. They will not stop because they see me with a keen stick in my hand.
Like many others, he complains of many bus drivers who do not stop for people with disabilities because they require more time or assistance boarding the bus. Bus driver Darren Monroe admits that sometimes that's the reason some drivers don't want to stop.
I did it once. I mean, my heart burned, but they really need the government need to get a bus mainly for transport the wheelchairs. That's the concern.
Kalisha Roll is a member of the National Council for the Disabled and a student at the Bahamas Technical and Vocational Institute. She has been in a wheelchair for most of her life, and while she recognizes the challenging circumstances facing bus drivers, it doesn't make things any easier for her.
When I was living in South Beach, I had to wait until 12 buses passed me before one could stop. And that wasn't a very easy situation. But they're now coming to grips with themselves now, saying that, you know, they do have a person in the wheelchair who's willing to catch their bus.
Access to public transportation is of vital importance, especially as people go about their day-to-day activities. And the introduction of a disabilities legislation could help to resolve this issue.
Minister of Transport and Aviation, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin, says a dynamic process is underway to improve the situation, including advancing disabilities legislation that is being spearheaded by the Honorable Melanie Griffin.
That law is going to mandate certain things in a number of areas, including buildings and public transport and parking. The second issue is the buses. The buses in reality are not physically, they're coaster buses. They've been using them for generations. They're not designed to, to physically, infrastructurally, to accommodate many people who have disabilities. And so that is a challenge that as we go into a unified bus system, we will, and as we look at the transportation system generally, we will have to ensure that people with disabilities are able to have mobility like everybody else to get from point A to point B.
And if the legislation comes into force, members of the disabled community like Kalisha Roll will have a much easier time doing something as simple as catching the bus.
I'm really waiting desperately for this legislation. Hope to God it pass. Jesus.
Jared Higgs, ZNS Network News.
On to news now from the Senate. Minister of State for National Security, Senator Keith Bell, says illegal firearms remain the weapon of choice for criminals. But he says the government is committed to the fight. In his contribution to the budget debate, he spoke to the numbers of illegal weapons seized.
In addition to having charged some 34 persons for homicide, murder, they would have seized some 200 illegal firearms off the street. These include some very high-powered weapons. Madam President, I wanted to bring some today for you all to see. But I said, I'll just hold off. Not yet, but it's coming. Wow. You got to see these things that's coming into this country. They have seized more than 3,000 rounds of illegal ammunition. 3,000. Madam President, I'm talking about armor-piercing bullets. They call them cop killers. These are the type of ammunition and weapons, cop killer bullets on our streets. And the officers are there going day and night. While we are sleeping, they are out there protecting us. Madam President, with respect to the interception and seizure of illegal weapons, the force has invigorated teams of detectives at the Firearms Tracing and Investigative Unit who direct operations against firearms traffickers and persons suspected of being in possession of illegal firearms and ammunition. The work is supported by our flying squad.
The Confiscated Assets Fund of the government is growing. The increase is reportedly due directly to the excellent work of police in their seizure efforts of illegal goods. Senator Bell, in his contribution to the budget debate, also spoke to that issue.
More than $1 million in cash was seized in operations from drug traffickers. $1 million, Madam President, cash. You know, Madam President, Of course, that money we anticipate will go to the confiscated asset funds account. This government anticipate that we would be able to replenish that account, and we will not operate it as a slush fund as the previous administration.
Now, Senator Bell also pointed out that when the Progressive Liberal Party government lost the election in 2007, it left $30 million in the confiscated assets fund. He questioned where the money went, to which opposition Senate leader, the Honorable Carl Bethel, gave this response.
When we took office, Madam President, there was a mere $100,000. So, Madam President, where did the money go? That's what we're trying to find. We're still doing our analysis.
Point of order. Point of order. The member is well aware that the confiscated asset fund is a shared fund, as between the Bahamas government and our partners. He's also aware that every removal of funds in terms of Bahamian funds within that confiscated asset funds was used by the former government directly and solely for the purposes of equipping the Royal Bahamas Police or Defense Forces, period. So to ask a disingenuous question like that, Madam President, particularly when the Honourable Senator, as Deputy Minister of National Security or Minister of State in the ministry, whatever, however you wish to categorize it, he has access to that information. And for him to stand and ask a question like that without also supplying the details which are in possession of the ministry is totally untoward and unbecoming of someone in his high office.
Senator Kwesi Thompson expressed his disappointment over the government's 2014-2015 budget. He says the government is introducing a fiscal budget which will result in one of the most difficult years for Bahamians in this country's history. Senator Thompson was extremely critical of its contents, singling out the proposed introduction of value-added tax.
Bahamians must begin to prepare themselves for the considerable pain and suffering this government seems insistent on inflicting on the poor and the middle class. It has been projected that come January 2015, there will be a considerable rise in the cost of living. Bahamians must get ready to pay more for food, clothing, and services. That paycheck will simply not buy as many items as it did before. And Bahamians must become accustomed to living with less and keeping less in their pockets. Life will be more difficult. Things will be more expensive, thanks to this caring and believe in Bahamian government.
Intermediary. It's a term that jumps out when purchasing insurance in the country, specifically since the numbers are so vast. There are, of course, the major insurance firms, but intermediaries are the ones that sell the policy while the firms pay the claims. Manager for the Intermediary and the Market Conduct Unit within the Insurance Commission of the Bahamas, Patrice Rolls, says there are in excess of 800 salespersons and 70 brokers and sub-agents.
We also want the consumer to know that we do regulate all of the intermediaries. Anyone who is doing business or selling insurance products to the public has to be registered with the Insurance Commission. We have the agents and brokers who are issued registration certificates and renewals, and they have to display them at their office. And we have the salespersons who come to your home to collect your policy monies. They have an identification card that shows who they are, that they're registered with the Insurance Commission, and which company they're representing.
Still ahead for us tonight, food fights. A culinary team gets ready to take on the region.
And then dribbles and drills. Practice in full swing as the boys basketball team heads into competition. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight.
How safe is your credit card?
We are living in a world where technology
people use phones and they can take a picture really quickly. So you want to be sure that you're always thinking safety first.
Credit card security, a special report on the Bahamas tonight.
This portion of the news was brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
This is your Royal Fidelity Business News. I'm Sieska Adderley. Over the last year, the National Workers Cooperative Credit Union Limited has done exceptionally well, and its CEO, Alfred Poitier, is confident they will be able to do so in 2014 as well as the credit union continues to show growth.
We saw an $8 million increase in assets over the previous year. We saw phenomenal growth in terms of profitability. We saw phenomenal growth in terms of membership. We have been doing extremely well.
In other business news, tourism officials have revealed that the 16 Islands 16 Weddings promotion has exceeded their expectations in the number of couples registering for the once-in-a-lifetime event. The promotion was launched on Valentine's Day, and since then, couples from all 50 states in the U.S. have registered. The total number of couples stands at 3,030, while the ministry's goal was to have 2,000. Director of Weddings and Honeymoons in the Ministry of Tourism, Frida Malcolm, said officials are thrilled with the results. And in international news, Japan has unveiled plans to cut the country's corporate tax to below 30% in several stages starting next year. The move is part of the Prime Minister's plan to revive the economy, a pledge made when he took office in December 2012. Japan's corporate tax rate at nearly 36% for large companies operating in the capital, Tokyo, ranks among the highest in the industrialized world. This has been your Royal Fidelity Business News. I'm Sia Scatterly.